Hey, Mike, are you feeling adventurous?
As always.
Well, so is our guest. Let's have her on tonight. She's called the Wilderness Vet. It's Caroline Murray.
Excellent. Hi, I'm Mike Brampton.
And my name is Julian Ho.
Welcome to Veterinary Ramblings.
Julian, so good to see you 100 years later. Mike,
No,
lovely
it's-
to meet you.
Hello, Caroline. It's lovely to meet you.
You're in New Zealand at the moment,
Yeah,
or Australia? New Zealand, though. And it's tough to keep up with you because you're the adventure traveller vet, and you could be anywhere in the world. So now we saw a picture of you, a little hold picture, while we were waiting for you to come on, which was you wearing a Mongolian hat with an eagle on your arm, and I noticed that the eagle is now dead and stuffed behind you on the wall.
Yeah.
So things didn't work out well for the eagle, but did you have a good trip in Mongolia otherwise?
I did. The half-dead bird you can see is actually a pheasant that one of the dogs caught a few years ago that's been stuffed. But Mongolia was totally amazing. The eagle was actually alive when it was on my arm, and they're actually really heavy.
It died later, did it?
Yeah.
They actually catch things to eat. It's really incredible to see.
Mm.
So that's a proper Mongolian hunting eagle, is it?
Yes, exactly that.
Yeah.
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 So they actually normally hunt, they're on a horse and they have like the reins of the horse in one hand and an eagle on the other hand. And the eagle goes and hunts things for them on the top of a mountain. It's quite crazy to see. And they actually have these competitions where with the eagle hunters and then camels, and sometimes the eagle hunters get really drunk and start fighting with an eagle on one arm, hitting each other with the whip. Lots of vodka and like crazy shit.
Whilst
Sounds
racing
great.
across the steppes at 100 miles an hour on their little
Yeah.
ponies.
Yeah,
So I understood.
They're
I
incredible
understood
riders, aren't they?
incredible.
It used to be distilled or fermented yak milk, but you're suggesting they're all into vodka now.
Both. Anything with alcohol is good. Fermented yak, but actually no, it's fermented mare's milk, horse
Is it?
milk.
Oh, right.
To be
Oh, is
honest,
it?
I get a whiff of it and it makes me want to spew. But they really love it, and they also heat it up. And if they don't have any food or they're short of food, they just like drink it in a bowl as a meal. So even the young children have it. And then vodka's the new Western introduction, just to increase the alcohol content. Not together.
So is the average life expectancy pretty good in Mongolia, or not so much?
Good question. So I think about 60s. I travelled with a friend there a few years ago who was 60, a Kiwi, and we met a Mongolian guy who we thought was about 80, and he was actually 60 as well. So because they have a really rough life, and like especially the herders, like living on the steppes, kind of like survival. They don't have like a long lifespan like we do, but they certainly like pack in the action.
Yeah. I read a book about Temujin. That was Genghis Khan's
Genghis
original name,
Khan.
wasn't it? Temujin. And fascinating lifestyle. That I think the herders are still pretty much there, aren't they? They live these nomadic or semi-nomadic lifestyles, carrying their yurts around on the horses and travelling from pitch to pitch throughout the year.
Yes, so that's the amazing thing. Like we're in the 21st century and they're literally almost living like in the days of Genghis Khan, but they now have mobile phones and solar. And I actually saw a Zanussi washing machine in the middle of the Mongolian steppes a few years ago, powered by wind and solar. So they're and they have motorbikes from Russia. But they pack up the yurts either on a truck or a camel, depending on where you are. And still, each summer and winter, they're in different places because of the grazing. It's quite incredible. So in the winter, it's -20, literally armpit deep on the horse's snow. And then in the summer, it can be 40 degrees. So it's huge variation. And they literally just kind of deal with everything.
Wow.
Amazing. Wow. I always get the impression, Caroline, I always have when talking to you, that we're halfway through a conversation when we start up, and it's difficult to know where best the conversation is going forwards or backwards. But let's start with what got you to Mongolia.
So, funnily enough, I started reading a book, probably similar to what you read, called Genghis Khan and the Making of the Modern World. And just reading about the crazy history of all the tribalness. I've always, when I was little, I used to want to live in a tribe on a desert island, and I thought that would be better than doing homework and everything would be really peaceful. Obviously, that's not the case, and sadly, I never got there. But I really love countryside and space, and like I have that in New Zealand, but Mongolia is like a whole nother level. There's literally, and I didn't kind of really appreciate it until I went there, literally millions of acres of unspoilt wilderness. So you're kind of, it's like roaming free. It's almost like you feel like you're going back to your, sapiens roots of like being the tribal cave people. And also I'd heard about the little, ponies/horses there, and seen some videos of the incredible riding that they do, and the eagles. And I also read a book, I don't know if you know, there's a Australian guy called Tim Hope, and he basically travelled on his own broke up with the girlfriend, decided to go on a bit of a trip and went through, as you do, Hungary, Mongolia, and a few other Stani, Siberian-like places. The locals gave him a dog because they said, you need to stuff this in your sleeping bag in the winter, otherwise you'll die of hypothermia. And then he had some pack ponies, but they kept stealing them, but saying, oh no, that's actually good because we don't steal ponies unless they're really good. And then he'd be like, okay, can I have my ponies back now? So I went to see a talk that he did at National Geographic in London, and it was so brilliant. I thought I have to go there. So that's kind of how I ended up there. With my usual thing of how I ended up in New Zealand, didn't actually know anything about the country, decided that looks like fun, let's do it.
So how long were you in Mongolia then, Caroline?
I actually went there 3 times.
Right.
So I was the Mongol Derby, it's like 1,000 miles. I think I was there 2 or 3 weeks. So there's like preparation for the riders and the horses. And then the race is like a couple of weeks long. But each time, because I didn't really want to go all that way for just 3 weeks, because I like traveling, as you probably know. So I tacked on, by chance, this is like what I love about my life. I was in Australia doing some work experience at a zoo, talking about Mongolia. And these people said to me, oh, we did this brilliant trip in Mongolia with this lady. And she does these like little kind of eco trips, employs Mongolians. Everything's kind of like down to like earth rootsy eco. And so she turned out she was from Cornwall, of course. And so she does all these little trips where they're called research trips, where they just go and like investigate new places in Mongolia. And so you're basically in a van trucking around with some Mongolians, doing hiking, bit of horse riding. We did a 5-day camel trek across the Gobi Desert, which I can tell you is better than any therapy I've ever had. Just you and the camel, like, and it's sweating. And being in the desert with nothing really else but sand is a really good way to like sort out stuff in your head.
Sure. It's like a sensory deprivation chamber.
Well, kind of like that, plus but nature. So it's like sensory deprivation, but then you're in a big wide space. And they have cell phone reception in the Gobi Desert. And in half of New Zealand, we don't. So I'm still trying to work that out. Our camel guide was on the phone nearly all the time.
Yeah, we have no cell phone reception here in West Sussex.
No, I haven't got very good cell phone reception in Hampshire either. But I'm getting this picture of this Mongolian herdsman trekking across on his camel, looking at his iPhone. Are you allowed to drive a camel whilst handling a mobile phone?
Well, even better, Mike. Before after we finished the trip, he just necked a couple of beers and then got on his off the camel onto the motorbike across the desert to go home. So I think, this country is where rules are mainly guidelines, and that actually is a thing.
Sounds like my kind of country, that does. That's for sure.
How did we get out there? Can you get another dual nationality, Mike? Can you get Greek, English, and Mongolian?
And Mongolian. Well, I've wanted to do Mongolia for many, many years. I don't know that my partner's that keen on that, but maybe I can convince her. Mind you, she lets me go off to the Arctic, doesn't she?
She does. She does.
We need to talk about
maybe
this
we should
afterwards.
I think we should do a veterinary rambling goes to Mongolia.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We should do that.
Well, if we've got cell phone coverage, then perhaps I could carry on running the company and doing the interviews from Mongolia.
Yeah.
A camel.
Yeah.
A camelback.
Oh man, this is amazing. So we've come in halfway through the story.
We have. So you were born in a little village and follow us from there.
I was actually born in a little town in Australia called Adelaide. That's now a very big town.
Okay.
I've heard of it.
And none of my family are from Australia, but my parents were the £10 pommies in 1970. They got a £10 one-way flight to Australia, something we can all only dream about. And my mother said she was a bit bored because she didn't like working, so she had me. And then when I was 4 months old, she decided that she'd had enough of Australia and wanted to leave, and was outraged when they told her that just because they had British passports, because I was born in Australia, I had to have an Australian passport to leave, for which I am eternally grateful, because now I can live in New Zealand and just go backwards and forwards. And, after the Bojo shit show, being British isn't really the greatest thing on earth. So I just reserve that passport for when I need it to get back in.
So the political situation. Hang on, wait, shut up, Julian. The political situation in the UK is known in Australia and New Zealand as the Bojo shit show. Is this what you're telling me, Caroline?
That's what I'm saying. Julian, that's actually quite an uncanny resemblance. But I see that Sunak's about to change it all up. I literally saw today with his 700 billion that he's got already or something. And Downing Street might be slumming it because he's got, mansions in Santa Monica, my dear.
That's incredible. Well, I mean, if you're going to lay allegations about the Bojo shit show on Veterinary Ramblings live, Caroline, I think you should know that we have, on various occasions, you obviously haven't listened to the show, introduced one of the UK's great statesmen, known throughout the land and throughout the world for his statesman-like truth-telling and fantastic auditory and author skills. Ex-journalist and ex-Prime Minister of the UK. Can I introduce Caroline Murray? Can I introduce you to our one and only Boris Johnson, otherwise known as BJ?
Caroline, thank you very much again, Mike, my dear friend, having me on the show. Shame Julian's never around when I come along. I hear the duffers off to make us some breakfast. But there we go. Little portal something for breakfast. Caroline, I hear you describe it as the Bojo affluent display in down under. It's not. I have to say, under the Conservative regime, we've managed to achieve quite a lot of quite a lot of success. The Brexit, I pushed through. I pushed through Brexit when they said I couldn't.
And pushed it out your bottom.
Wrongly, out my bottom. Completely, you're absolutely right. And Northern Ireland will never be right. I admit that. I made a little error of judgment. I think there. But by assuming that
amongst others.
But I think given time, I can make things good for the whole of the British territories, such as New Zealand and Australia as well, which I think is still owned by us in many ways.
BJ, sorry to interrupt you there, BJ. I think we have a new Prime Minister now. And you better not go and see if you can get a job.
I'm going to go cap in hand and see if I can make his tea or polish his shoes. Yes, it's very important for me to stay in Downing Street to keep an eye on parties on the party. Yes. Goodbye.
Good show. Thanks for popping in, BJ. See you later, mate.
Does he not get the 115k a year that Trust got for being here for 5 seconds?
They all get it.
Oh, yes.
They all get it. But of course, Trust will turn it down because that's the honourable thing to do. Just like our Home Secretary who resigned last week because she had breached major security and protocol issues and felt that it was inappropriate for her to maintain her position, so she resigned.
Mm-hmm.
She was appointed yesterday too, in the same position.
Okay, now all forgiven.
And regarding the shit show, it's fine, because what's happened is we've released all of the restrictions on the water companies, enabling them to pump billions of tons of sewage straight into our rivers, into the sea. So there isn't really a shit show to see because we've flushed it all out to the oceans.
The shit show is being diluted even as we speak. It's good for the fish, good for the plants, not so good for the surfers.
Wow. And meanwhile, in Kiwiland, they're trying to tax the farmers for fart tax. So they're all going to start producing less animals, and we're not going to have enough food, and we're going to have no national food security, and we're going to have to import food from the countries that are not helping the climate. Well done, Cindy.
That's good. That's good. And hopefully you can carry on with your the New Zealand poisoning thing. But that's another story. We've discussed it before. So Caroline, this is fantastic. You're actually a vet, aren't you?
I am a vet, although some people don't believe it.
we call them clients.
I identify as the wilderness vet.
The wilderness
adventure traveller, yes.
Okay.
And health advocate is my new thing as well, because of all the crazy stuff that happened in the last few years.
Right. Okay. Well, I want to hear about your story as a vet.
Yes.
So you were growing up in Adelaide with a mum who didn't want to be there, and you decided at 5 years old that you wanted to be a vet.
Not quite.
Go on.
So I left when I was 4 months old. And my mother, I found recently a letter from my mother complaining to TWA that they didn't have a seat for me on the plane and that I was strapped in a cardboard box to the bulkhead, and she was very outraged. And they wrote her a letter back saying, maybe you'd like to investigate in some proper invest in some proper baby carrying gear next time you travel your baby. So then I had, the young kids today, I kind of feel sorry for them. I think you're kind of similar generation, both of you. I had the idyllic childhood where we basically lived on the estate and ran free all day. And we used to be in nature, and I used to bring back random shriveled up baby birds and nests and bits of animals to bring home.
Frogs,
so I knew
newts,
that I wanted
that sort of stuff. Yeah.
Yes.
No, we didn't really have newt. We didn't have amphibious things. But we had, earthworms. Earthworms we used to rescue when it was raining. Very important.
We basically grew up feral, didn't we?
Yes, but it was so good. Feral and free. And we came home when we needed food, aka sweets, from our parents or our neighbours' parents.
Yeah, pretty
Or from any stranger who happened to have any.
That we were told not to talk to. Just take
Absolutely.
the sweets.
Yes, don't
take the sweets and run.
Have the sweets.
Yeah.
So, running wild, feral on the estate, and then you thought, I want to be a vet.
So then I thought my mother introduced me to horse riding. Well, she basically said, we're doing horse riding. So then I decided I wanted to be a really famous show jumper, but I was actually really scared of jumping, so that didn't work out. So then I decided to go back to the animal care thing. And it wasn't really till I was a teenager that I decided I wanted to actually be a vet, after I did some clinical experience at the local vet. So I really like helping people and looking after animals. But obviously, like you were saying about the clients, didn't realise that there's this thing called psychology of communication and conflict, which they conveniently don't teach you at vet school.
They don't. Well, when we did it, they didn't know that it was a thing.
Why would you need to learn that?
Yeah, exactly.
You're a vet.
Yes. We issue commands. We didn't have a discussion.
Yeah. Superior to all other known living forms of man.
We
Apart
tell
from
people
probably-
what to do, not
Apart
vice
from probably
versa.
politicians and lawyers.
Who make interesting clients.
Yeah, they would, wouldn't they? Yes. Can you imagine treating Boris Johnson's cat? Anyway,
not going
we'll
there.
move on from that. So you became a vet. You became a vet, and then you had the misfortune of meeting me, and decided what I don't want to do is to live in the country that Julian's in. I want to go away and preferably hide in the midst of the Gobi Desert. Is that pretty much it?
Kind of it, yeah. So I reckon
Yeah.
part of the reason, I blame my genetics because all of my family, although I was brought up in England, all of my family are not from England. So they're all kind of like roaming and foreign, and they all came to England, my grandparents, as refugees. So I think it's actually in my blood to just travel around.
Mhm. And so you've always had the wanderlust, or that just developed?
Pretty much always, yes. But obviously, I didn't really have any money until I started working to indulge the wanderlust. So I had to wait till I was at university to start doing that, which actually was brilliant. The first opportunity I got was after third year vet school. I decided I didn't really like narrow-minded vet school and I needed to do something else for a year. So I managed to blag a £10,000 Glaxo research scholarship. So I had 10 weeks in Cornell, which I actually feel I should still apologise to my professor for, because I still have no idea about research. I used to pour my agar gels and they hadn't set properly and they just go all over the bench and onto the floor, and he used to despair.
I know why that is.
The
That's
secret ingredient
is L-asparagine, shortened to L-asp, and most techs will say that L-asp is L-aspartic acid. So consequently, your agar gel was probably too acidic, because instead of putting in the peptide L-aspartic thingy, you put in L-aspartic acid. I know that because I did that mistake as well.
Well, all I know, it was very liquid, and my professor was not happy.
Yeah, I couldn't get it to set. I couldn't get mine to set. I was doing a fungi study on Derbyshire fungi, and
Yes, you do.
couldn't get my agar to set. And spookily, the spores that I'd actually been able to go and find, I couldn't get to grow either, because the pH was wrong.
Okay.
Right. Anyway,
so the upside of the £10,000 that Glaxo kindly gave me was that after the 10 weeks of complete failure of research, I got to travel around America for 6 weeks on Amtrak, which was like one of the most amazing things I've ever done.
Wow.
And that's how it all began. Again, completely clueless. I just looked on the map and decided this place looked like fun and got a ticket there. Which is kind of how my life is still rolling.
So you're always so incredibly positive, Caroline. That's what I've always found out about you. But are you always a positive person? Have you always been positive?
No, in a short answer. So I've had some really dark, challenging times with work and personal things. But over the last year, on my constant, as vets, we're always researching how can I fix this shit, especially if there's something wrong with you. So we Google it and go from there. And so I found, just through some random friends, going backwards a tiny bit, I think things always happen for a reason, and you always eventually find what you need. And I came across NLP, and I have to say it's really been a big game changer for reframing the brain.
That's Neuro-Linguistic Programming, isn't it?
Yeah, Neuro-Linguistic Programming. So it basically reframes and rejigs your actual circuits in your brain, so to think in a more positive way and to overcome all the limiting beliefs that you have when you're little, which most of us vets have, like we're not good enough, imposter syndrome, and low self-esteem, which I think nearly all perfectionist A-type personality vets have. And that's why we end up in a lot of problems.
I think you're absolutely right. We put these unreasonable demands on ourselves, don't we?
Yeah. And other people, I've been told, high expectations.
No,
like when I say...
It's just that most other people are rubbish.
Well, I keep saying recently when I kept saying to the physio, why can't people just do their job? She said, you've got unreasonable expectations of yourself and others. And I said, no, I just expect people to do what they're employed to do. It's pretty simple.
Which seems reasonable.
Yeah.
Seems reasonable to me.
That seems open to interpretation of what people are actually supposed to do, apparently.
I think the guidelines are broadening these days, aren't they?
Yeah. And actually, the New Zealand Vet Council, to their credit, have just changed the CPD requirements. So instead of watching 251 webinars a year, which, as we know, doesn't really help you or get you any extra pay because no one really cares how many certificates you've got, although they've each cost you about £10,000 each, you can now do well-being as part of your CPD. So I'm doing my NLP as my vet CPD, because they're trying to address, like the suicide rate and that we actually need to try and look after ourselves, not everyone else and their animals. So that's a really positive thing.
Yeah, that's great. That's really good.
Sadly, the RCVS don't listen to the to veterinary ramblings, so and they don't look beyond the shores of the UK to see what other countries might be doing to benefit the vets that are in their care.
Totally aware of that problem.
It's an evolving subject, isn't it? Mind Matters Initiative has been running by the RCVS, and I think hopefully there'll be some changes that are quite tangible throughout the whole profession soon. But it seems like a great move, doesn't it?
That sounds like Julian's got his job at the RCVS finally.
I think one of the issues with Mind Matters, and to be fair, like the New Zealand Vet Council, apart from this, has been very similar, as in not really supporting us, is that it doesn't matter how many webinars about sleep, nutrition, and how to look after yourself you watch, if you're still being expected to work 60 hours a week and being flogged to death within an inch of your life and having 2 hours to no sleep on call. So there has to be some kind of balance. Employers need to take some responsibility at some point for how they treat their staff. And what I've noticed is that people who look after their staff are not short of staff. It's pretty simple. It's not rocket science.
Yeah.
And the people who constantly have vacancies don't look after their staff.
But if there were not vet vacancies, would you not struggle to get your locum jobs?
Well, interesting question, Mike. I have still, even though there is a shortage here, in my hometown, I've been refused part-time work because I don't have children, even though they're desperately short of vets. And I've been told by several multi-billion-dollar corporates that I'm charging too much money and they wouldn't be able to make any money if they paid me my hourly rate. So I think people sometimes create their own problems.
So just you didn't get a job because you haven't got children?
No. They told me that there was no scope for part-time people and I could work 10 hours a day or not at all. So I chose the not at all. Thank you very much.
I see. So you're only allowed to work part-time if you have children?
2 out of 3 of the clinics in the town where I live had that attitude. So I discovered this when I had a really horrendous lumbar disc injury and was in severe pain and couldn't work 8 hours. And so I tried to get part-time work. And then I actually got a letter from another clinic saying, how dare you email us and tell you what hours and days you can work? If we employ a locum, they will work 5 days a week, 10 hours a day, the weekend on call, and then continue the next week. And so I said, well, good luck finding a locum. So people aren't really learning here the lessons. And I think the public just really aren't aware of what's going on in the background.
No, all they see is the smiling face of the vet that eventually sees them, even though that smile is brought upon by too much coffee and
after they've finished crying in the toilet for 10 minutes, or sometimes in the store cupboard because there's someone in the toilet.
Already crying.
Yeah.
You mentioned there that you injured your lumbar disc, and I'm intrigued here because now I've got images. I've only just met you, Caroline, but I've already got images that you probably fell off a camel whilst fighting a kangaroo and juggling chimpanzees, and spookily your back didn't take it.
I would really love to have that story, and the chimpanzees is a whole nother story, not involving the back.
Okay.
But very boring. I came back to New Zealand. So I had to leave New Zealand because my dad was really ill, like terminally ill, and thought I was going to be away for 6 months. So just packed everything up really hurriedly. And luckily, by chance, my friends had a big container to put it in. And then 5.5 years later, got back after my dad passed away and lots of really horrendous traumatic things that happened, very broken, to discover that my friend's container wasn't really well ventilated and nearly all my stuff had gone mouldy. So I had to spend 2 weeks lugging boxes around and sorting everything out. And that's how I injured my back. Because I didn't really have anyone to help me. So very boring story with very, really not nice consequences.
So do you feel up to telling us about these consequences?
Yes. So after the injury, I already had a thing. So in 2008, I had a really bad wrist fracture in Alaska, a whole nother story.
That was wrestling with polar bears.
Really similar, husky sled dogs. Got skidooed to the local hospital via a plane and a few other dogs stuffed under my seat. Anyway, as a result of that, so it was a really bad fracture of like my distal radius end of the here. So I got this thing called chronic regional pain syndrome after that. So for 7 months, I had really horrific nerve pain. Was in New Zealand at the time, kept asking everyone, why does it still hurt? They kept telling me the pain's in your head. We don't know. And it wasn't diagnosed until 4 years later, after a cow kicked the plate and bent it. They told me it wasn't possible for the plate to bend, and it bent it into my tendons. So then I was really screaming in pain. And then I went to see a UK orthopedic surgeon, and he kind of looked at me in abject horror, like you've done after this story, and said, have you heard of chronic regional pain syndrome? Because I think that's what you've got. But really, unfortunately, it wasn't diagnosed in New Zealand. So that's still been a problem. So roll on a year and a half. They told me it would take 6 weeks to get back to work. And it actually took me a year and a half because it was really horrifically painful. And I had a lot of weakness. But I managed to get back to like really good use of like carving and everything. So I was very lucky because the surgery was done in Alaska. And then 2019, I had the lumbar injury and had some really bad mistreatment by some chiropractors, some acupuncture people, and basically like ruptured the disc worse. So for 2 months, I couldn't really move, literally couldn't get out of bed, was curled up in a ball, was on 7 painkillers, nothing was working. Then I was told painkillers will only do so much. You just need to harden up, pains in your head. Ended up in hospital on fentanyl, ketamine, paracetamol, tramadol, paracetamol, ibuprofen, and another drug, still in unbearable pain, which was when I realized I had my aha moment. I met a guy who had been in the army and he'd had a motorbike accident and had broken bones. As I was shuffling past him, sniveling on my ketamine drip, he was having no painkillers. And he told me that he, in the army, had learnt to block out pain with his brain. And even the nurses kept trying to shove paracetamol and stuff down him. And he was like, no, he looked really uncomfortable, as you would with broken ribs. But he was like dealing with it with no drugs. And that kind of set off my whole brain pain journey. So for 2 years, I couldn't really sit down. I couldn't stand up. I had nearly 2 years off work because no one would give me part-time work. I had to leave my job. And on top of that, as if that wasn't bad enough, I got given a drug called pregabalin, which is the trade name is Lyrica in some places. And in some, for some people, it's a really good painkiller. Unfortunately, for tens of thousands of others, it's really bad for you and actually causes brain damage. And for me, it disrupted all my hypothalamus and pituitary function. So my thyroid tanked. I wasn't really working. My estrogen went off the charts. So, you know, estrogen, not good for females, off the charts, really crazy. I went completely mad. I was crying all the time. I was really angry. Doctors kept telling me nothing was wrong. We won't do any blood tests because we don't need to. Then I had some really horrendous gynecological problems that you probably don't want to hear about on this program. Anyway, long story short, after a year of like
Caroline.
literally being unable to function or even get out of bed, I had to have a hysterectomy because it was so serious, and then had another they told me I'll be better after 6 weeks of that, and it took me 6 months. So it's literally only been, honestly, the last 12 months maybe that I've felt like a human being again. And I've still got hormonal problems. And then I discovered, doing the research that we do, that this drug is actually banned in certain countries. And there was lots of class action lawsuits against the manufacturers in the States because so many people had really severe permanent brain damage. So I was lucky my kind of brain zappiness and craziness has calmed down, but I've still got some really major problems. But that's how I got into NLP and everything, because I just kind of disintegrated mentally with all that, especially with the doctors telling me that nothing was wrong for 2 years.
I can see how that might be a little frustrating.
Yeah.
Problematic. And I couldn't work.
I'm overawed by that. And my sympathies for your struggle over the last couple of years with that. Awful journey to have. But it sounds like you've really adopted the physician heal thyself attitude on that, haven't you? And then you gave us a little email, little spiel, telling us a little bit about that, but not quite in as graphic as you had just now. Wow.
Actually, I realised that less drugs and more brain things to work on with your brain is actually the way to go, and that was what really revolutionised everything. Even so, one of the books that I'd recommend anyone reading, it's just one of the first books I read, is called Finding Peace in a Frantic World. And it's by I think John Kabat-Zinn. It's about mindfulness and meditation. And they talk about the raisin meditation and the chocolate meditation. So put a raisin in your mouth and how does it feel? How does it taste? Can you smell it? And just little things which I was like, this is completely ridiculous. But that's kind of how I started, from just really small things. Because one of the problems is when you're in such unbearable pain that you literally need to be unconscious with drugs because your brain, you can't deal with it. It's kind of difficult to focus on anything else. So it took a really long time to get past that. But then I realized, and actually the pain specialist told me, in the medical world, they're very behind. And I recently went to this brilliant pain symposium, and they basically said that doctors don't really know about pain and they're not taught about it. And now I feel like I'm kind of really an expert on what I had because the doctors don't really understand it. So we need to stop giving all the drugs, because giving lots of opioids, which they often do, opens up the little pain channels, and then you get really chronic pain. So it's good for really acute pain to kind of try and nip it in the bud. But if you keep giving it for a really long time, like lots of people on tramadol for years, actually it's really bad for you. And when I stopped the tramadol, the gabapentin, and all the really strong drugs, I had no difference in my pain levels, which was really interesting.
Yeah.
That is interesting. I'm intrigued by this raisin and chocolate meditation. Does it work with gin?
Anything that you really like.
Okay.
So I've actually
just sort of hold it in your mouth for a while and just think.
Yes. So instead of gargling some gin or some chocolate.
Excellent. Two of my favourite things.
So you can actually say it's medicinal, Mike.
Well, I'm going to go through some good therapy later on, I'll tell you that.
Yeah, it might be hard just holding it in the mouth. I'll try.
You've got to swallow occasionally to refresh it a little bit.
Yeah, I'll try my best.
You mentioned something else in your email, kintsugi. Have I pronounced it right?
Oh, yes. So what I've done is I'm literally in the process of setting up a little holistic health community where I want to do help people, especially kind of 40-plus-year-old women who are having issues with their hormones and brain and pain stuff, because all of that is connected. And I'm calling it jigsaw tribes, because we're all a jigsaw made up of lots of little pieces. And if they don't fit together really well, then the whole thing is just a mess. And tribe, because everyone has really wants to belong. Human beings have innate need to belong. And so kintsugi is, I discovered this really brilliant thing. It's a Japanese like a principle. And it's so instead of like saying I'm really broken, so what they do is they get broken like clay or terracotta pots and they join them together with gold. So all the gold is in the cracks. So they actually celebrate the cracks and the broken bits, and actually putting things back together is a really good thing. So we're not actually really broken, we're healing.
I did the same thing recently to a butter dish that I dropped.
Did you put gold in the broken bit?
Yes. Yes.
Somebody broke one of my Tower of London poppies.
No.
The poppy now has gold veins running through the leaves on the poppy. Yeah.
Wow.
I think I just saw a picture of it on the internet, but I didn't realise it was a kintsugi. I have to say it's not real gold. It's air fixed gold paint. Other Humbrol enamel paints are available, but there we go.
Wow. I only discovered it recently, but I thought it's a really good kind of, I don't know what the word is, not phenomenon. It's like, celebrating that you're being put back together, not concentrating on the bad brokenness. Are we going to see the Tower of London now, Mike?
Here's one of my latest projects.
Oh, very nice.
Wow, that's literally it.
There you go. And I've got powdered gold that I mix into the resin and put it all together. I think it's a wonderful thing.
So now the listeners can't see what Caroline just saw, which was a rather nice broken enamel bowl or pottery bowl that Mike is fixing using the ancient Japanese art of kintsugi. Or the modern Japanese.
But I'm loving the concept of applying this to humans and to healing and the mind. So
well, that's because people get a bit upset if you smash their head repeatedly on the floor till it breaks and then try and put it back together with gold.
Yeah, I don't think it would have the same result.
Is that where I'm
Several
going
conversations with the police later. Yes, officer, I understand it now. and then you're back to doing it again, aren't you, Mike? Yeah.
But I'll get lots of time to practice my kintsugi in the prison, won't I?
Yes, you will. And jigsaws as well. I'm a bit chuffed, actually, because I just finished a recent jigsaw puzzle. Just finished it yesterday. And I was really pleased. It took me two years to do it.
Wow, what was it of?
It was just a little Disney one, and it said 3 to 4 years on the side of the box.
Oh, well done, mate.
So I just did it in 2. It's fantastic.
That's fantastic. Well done. That's really good.
Thanks.
Really good.
Well done. I think jigsaws are actually one of the things that it says are really good for your brain, because they just distract it from everything else. So actually lots of adults, even in New Zealand, I've noticed, are starting to use jigsaws again.
So tell us about, I'm going to pronounce this wrong, I'm sure, Ubuntu or Ubuntu?
Oh, Ubuntu, yes. So Ubuntu is a Zulu concept that means humanity, which is basically everyone belongs, and how like our relationship with ourselves is based on how we get on with other people. So that's one of the other little principles of my jigsaw tribe, because one of the things that people find if they're in chronic pain or chronically injured, or, with mental health challenges, as most of us who've been on the phone to Vet Life at some point feel, is that we're really alone in our suffering. But actually, when you kind of like poke your head over the parapet, there's often, whatever random thing is wrong with you, there's often lots of other people who have a similar thing. So it's just about helping each other and supporting each other and being like a giant family, which, Africans need to function as a tribe to survive. And in the book, I don't know if you've read the book Sapiens, it basically says how when we were, but what he was saying is like our mental health and kind of general goodness of health of civilizations was much better when we were all tribes helping each other. And now we've all gone to capitalist selfish greed. It's not really so good,
No.
as we see.
So, Caroline, we feel the need, Mike and I, to put you under a little pressure, because we know that with your neuro-linguistic programming, your NLP, you can take a bit of stress in your life. So, have you heard of a little part of our program called 60-second CPD?
Yeah. And I actually timed it and was a bit over 60 seconds, so I have to talk really fast.
Talk really, really fast. So what happens is an electronic axe comes out of your screen and chops your nose off if you go on more than a second beyond that. So if you're up to the challenge, we'd love to hear a 60-second CPD.
Okay.
This is your time. So Caroline Murray on Veterinary Ramblings, 60 seconds on the brain and pain starts. Oh, sorry. Oh, stop. Oh, no. Oh, that was a disaster.
You've already been disadvantaged.
I pressed the button at the wrong time. Oh, God, bloopers outtake. Caroline Murray, 60 seconds on the brain and pain, starting now.
Okay, great. So things that can affect the brain and pain, adverse child experiences and intergenerational trauma can actually change your DNA and cause increased pain if you have traumas. Things that can help with your brain and pain, singing, playing music loudly, laughter, yoga, and if you're a child, breastfeeding and having some singing and music actually really helps. Things that are not good for the brain and pain, low vitamin D, thyroid, low thyroid, high estrogen, gluten, dairy, and caffeine. Things that can really help with the brain and pain, heat, so like sitting in a sauna if you really like heat, or for other people, cold, splashing cold water on your wrists, face, or humming, and getting out of your brain into your body, so movement.
Wow.
Done.
Perfect. Pass on.
So
amazing. You didn't mention gym, but that was otherwise, I think, fairly comprehensive.
In that 1 minute, I've got an hour's worth of topics I want to ask you about.
Yes. At least an hour's worth. I think we can gloss over certain bits of it because we're too old. But
I don't see it. I don't understand why breastfeeding should be limited to children. What? Oops. Oh, I'm sorry. Perhaps we'll be able to cut that bit.
It's a discussion we wouldn't have if this was the evening, because Mike and I just haven't had our breakfast yet. So.
Actually, that was one of the most fascinating CPD talks that I saw. There's a woman who actually gets paid to sing and play the guitar next to a lady who's got her child breastfeeding while it's having little medical procedures done. And that's her actual job. We're in the wrong profession.
We really are. Maybe someone will pay me to play my didgeridoo to people who are having operations.
Got it. Hang on a minute. Next time I go into human theatres to look at anaesthesia, I'm going to take my drum kit. And I'm going to tell them to dispense with all of these drugs. I'm going to play drums during surgery, and the patient will be fine. Honest.
I could have my harmonica around my neck.
A New Zealand, really fascinating, literally about 2 weeks ago, a New Zealand cardiothoracic surgeon posted on LinkedIn that they had, I think it's a Maori or Islander patient, and all their kind of relatives came in and did this, I don't know what the exact word is, like cultural sing-song thing. And because they were like possibly going to die during this surgery. And the patient had like amazing clinical outcomes and recovered really well. And they think it's because, you know, the effect on the brain of the singing and calming just before anesthesia. So it's so fascinating.
That's incredible, isn't it? There are so many ways that we can modulate all of our perceptions, and of course, pain is a perception which is perhaps sparked by afferent neurons telling us that something is nasty, is noxious, is painful. But it's how we perceive that pain that gives us the bad experience of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Some people like it.
Amazing CPD.
We're all also, you know, like the singing and the guitar thing, we're all getting away from big pharma and the Western stuff and coming back to the natural stuff that everyone was doing several 100,000 years ago that now is like, oh, let's rediscover what we knew actually works several centuries ago. But Big Pharma doesn't like that because it's free and you're not buying their drugs.
No, this is true. This is true.
Yeah, that was fabulous. Hey, Julian, have you got a CPD certificate?
You know, by pure coincidence.
As we've had our 60-second CPD, have you got a CPD certificate for it?
I have. Look, it's right here.
Oh, fantastic!
It says.
Wow!
It says certificate of adventuresomeness, and this certifies that travel broadens the mind and slims the wallet. But we should all do it anyway. And it says what makes you glow there. And there's some pictures. So here we go. Now this is. I couldn't find a picture of a jigsaw puzzle in my photo collection, but here is a rock that's essentially a jigsaw puzzle. And this is a rock on a beach in Dorset, and it's a sort of hard clay rock that over the centuries has become frozen and thawed so many times. It looks a bit like a honeycomb of cracks, and they're incredibly beautiful. This is a waterfall on Kinder Scout that flows. I don't know if you can see it. It's actually flowing uphill. Mm-hmm. It's called Kinder Downfall. And there's always such a breeze blowing up the valley that the waterfall gets blown upwards rather than falling down. So, you know, I'm widely travelled, Dorset to the peaks. There's a desert. I thought you might like a picture of a desert there to remind you of the Gobi. And there's a wallaby. There's a couple.
Isn't that a kangaroo?
I think that's a kangaroo, Julian.
No, it's a wallaby. It's a wallaby. Sure? It's at. Yeah, because they're roaming free at a place just down the road from a stately home down the road from us. Released them into their gardens a couple of hundred years ago. They're running free around there.
That looks just like that one that attacked me.
It does, doesn't it? And there's and we haven't got onto your chimpanzees yet. But I thought there's a couple of pictures of a couple of chimpanzees.
Wow,
chimpanzees. We can talk about chimps.
Can you scan that and email it to me?
No.
I'm going to put it on my wall.
I can do that. I can certainly do that.
I'm going to send it as part of my yearly CPD to the New Zealand Vet Council.
Yes. I don't need to scan it because I did the original on my computer, so I can just email that to you. It's probably the easiest.
Amazing.
So I'll do that.
That's brilliant. I want to hear what the New Zealand Vet Council think of our CPD.
I think we've got material here for another rambling session down the line. And I don't want to ruin all that material because we haven't touched on chimpanzees, which I know you're very close to, aren't you? You supported charity. I don't mean genetically.
Genetically.
Do you think you could introduce that slightly better, Julian?
Try not to be insulted. I thought I did have a bit of extra facial hair recently.
It's just the light. It's fine.
Actually, I've got a funny story about that. Can I just squeeze in before I get to the charity thing? After I'd done my first amazing chimpanzee stint in Western Africa, so the way you have to actually let a chimpanzee examine you is pretend you're grooming it, because obviously they don't like you prodding it or doing injections or interfering. So what you have to do when they groom each other, they do this, like look through the fur. And so when I was there for 3 months on my first visit, and the first week back at work in my normal job in the Welsh borders, a guy brought his dog in, and subconsciously, as I was examining the dog, I was pushing around in its hair, and he looked at me like he wasn't quite sure if I'd lost the plot or not, because I was still in chimpanzee. And when I said, "Oh, sorry, I'm still in chimpanzee mood," that didn't really improve the situation much. But yes, I support charity that I'd really like to plug, called Sanagayong Chimpanzee Rescue Centre. I think that's the exact kind of the name of it. It's on Facebook, and it's based in Bertoua in east of Cameroon, which is in West Africa, literally in the jungle. And it's quite an amazing place. So the whole place is run on solar that runs all their electrics. and they've just got kind of like running water, and it's very basic but very beautiful, and they do quite an incredible job of rearing. So all the chimpanzees are orphaned. Unfortunately, lots of wildlife trafficking and also lots of logging, so they kill the parents. So there's a lot of various ages there, and they've got really big enclosures, so a kind of like part of the jungle, and then eventually they rehabilitate them. They're looking for like a larger area. So, and it's run by an incredible and very young English girl called Jodie Priest, who pretty much single-handedly organises everything in the middle of nowhere. She's quite incredible. And so I just like to alert people to that charity. They always desperately need funding, but they're also really great to volunteer at. They've got beautiful, beautiful little cabins that you can stay in, and you can help feed and look after chimpanzees, and it's pretty incredible experience.
So is that
sounds amazing?
So do they require vet skills?
So you can be a vet, but they also just take normal people who are not vets. Just who want to work with animals.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Just to add, it is a really hot tropical country. It's in East Cameroon, which is in West Africa. So it's really hot and really humid. So you need to have lots of jabs and take lots of anti-malarials. But it's quite an incredible experience.
That's absolutely brilliant. Listen, I'm going to have to very sadly say that I think we probably ought to be saying, if our listeners have enjoyed the show, don't forget to log in, click like, share, subscribe, because it really does help. And I'm going to throw the invitation open. If you'd like us to cover anything else with Caroline in another episode, then please drop us a line and we'll ask her some of those questions, because we've scratched the surface on so many things this show, and it's been an absolute pleasure.
Really has.
Caroline Murray, thank you very, very much for joining us on Veterinary Ramblings. And if I could wish you, may your dog go with you.
May your dog go with you.
Cheers.
Thank you very much. It was lovely to talk to you both.
Brilliant stuff. And cut.
Wow.
Caroline.
That's amazing.
You've got such a fascinating story, and it's a real privilege to be able to listen to that story. We really enjoyed it.
It really is. And I think a lot of people who listen to the show listen because, whether they admit it or not, they want to get some advice. And they want to feel better. They want to be uplifted, or they want to learn new techniques for living. And I think you've given them all of that.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.